husband and I were looking at purchasing this, and everywhere I went, people saying, "Oh, you know it's haunted, you know it's haunted." It actually made me really uncomfortable and a little bit scared. Yeah, it looks good, doesn't it? Elegant. My husband and I bought this establishment in November of 1999. So just a little over, we're coming up into our 10th year. It really is a treasure and a building of the historical significance and of this age to be functioning today in pretty much the same way it did 240, 50 years ago, where it's serving travelers and welcoming weary travelers, I always say, is it's fulfilling that role still. The ghost history is such an important part of the ambiance of the building. And it has got such a great reputation as a haunted establishment, as you know. So that's really part of what makes it so special, is that people feel that when they come in here, they're experiencing maybe a piece of history that still is alive and changing every day. This building, the date that we officially have on it is 1762, although there is record of a two-room stone building that was here as early as the 1740s, which we believe may be where the bottom floor of this building is, and that the rest of the building was built up from there. It has functioned as a tavern and a public house, and it also acted as a sort of like a courthouse where they would hear some trials, and a traveling magistrate would come in and hear trials.
I even heard my name so loud the other day.
Chris.
Yeah, that's the way I hear mine, and not when it's quiet.
Not when it's quiet, it's when it's real
It's
busy.
when there's a lot
A
of.
lot of people
Mhm.
around and there's no one there.
Yeah.
And like if I'm closing, I come down through the dining room by myself, I almost always hear my name, or it feels like someone's like walking beside me, and I felt like cool breezes before.
It was a windy day out, and the top door to the third floor balcony blew open. So I went up and I deadbolted it shut. Well, I had to do that 3 different times, which we had no rooms and we weren't even open yet, so there were no customers in the building. Therefore, there was really no one that could have unlocked the door and opened it up. This is the door. I mean, it was like this with it gated totally shut, and you can tell that this is not going to come up on its own. And that happened 3 times in 5 minutes, like I said, and it bothered me a little
The
bit.
door was completely open?
Oh yeah, it was blown completely open, yeah.
It's not going to pop open just by...
No. I mean, secure.
Yep.
We're listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and the main reason for that is the role that the building played during the Whiskey Rebellion.
In the mid-1794, during the Whiskey Rebellion, embattled farmers met here and raised a liberty pole to protest the federal excise tax on whiskey.
And the farmers, the local farmers in the area, met here to protest the whiskey tax, which they felt was an unfair taxation. Whiskey was their main form of currency at that time, and they all had stills in their backyards, and they all had just fought in the Revolutionary War and felt that it was an unfair taxation against them. Not only did the farmers meet here to protest the whiskey tax, but when George Washington, who was president at the time, called up the militia to come out and suppress the Whiskey Rebellion, they camped here on the property. So that role probably is our most important historical happening here on the property.
And a lot of things have happened, while I was working here that, I can't explain. One is a story about a busser Actually, he was a dishwasher and begged to be a busser, and we let him bust. So one night he's out here, and this table right over here was the one he was clearing off. There was nobody left down here. Everybody was gone. I was out front. He was back here, and all of a sudden he came walking out front, and he had this look on his face. I knew something was wrong. He said, I was setting the table, and every time I bent down to get the clean stuff to put on a table, I heard a noise, and the salt and pepper shaker were in the middle of the placemat. And as you can see, the salt and pepper shakers are in the middle of the table. He said that happened to him twice. He finally said, I do not want to be a busser anymore. And that was the end of his bussing career.
I sometimes will open the restaurant by myself, and it's odd because you'll be standing by a door and it will open and close, and you just kind of look at it like, okay, like it opens wide enough for somebody to come in, and it's like, and then you think, well, is it the air? Like, I don't think that it is.
Our kitchen door, when you push out, it only opens the width of the door because there's a counter behind it. And normally somebody will hold that door open for you, or you force your way through it with a large tray. I was carrying a large tray in front of our fireplace, and that door swung open without me touching it. And it stayed open while I delivered my food, and as soon as I walked back through the door shut. So I said, thank you. I don't know who you are, but thank you.
So the door opened for you?
Yes. Yes.
Like someone opened it.
Yeah, it was like somebody, from the outside opened it. Another server saw me coming and would have opened the door for me. But there was nobody here. I was here by myself.
I was giving a tour to about 13 people, and they were taking pictures. And there was a woman that was standing there in a Civil War style nursing uniform that was cinched at the waist, very starched, very long. The buttons that would overlap. And I saw her. There was another woman that actually felt her touch her shoulder, and then she walked to in between both the bedrooms, and she stood in that doorway, and someone took a picture, and that's where, and they saw her on the picture.
Now, Robert Callender is an extremely interesting historical figure. And he was a land baron. He was almost like a frontiersman / entrepreneur. And he traded with the Indians, and he had a family and a relatively respectable life back in the eastern part of the state. And then he also had this kind of second life where that was not so, I guess reputable would be the word for it.
One of our customers who is, I would say, a non-believer was walking down the hallway one night and heard footsteps behind him, a woman's footsteps. But he got down to the end of the hall, he turned around to look, and there was nobody in the hallway. He'd come in quite often with his parents. His parents were sitting in the tavern. His grandfather brought him out here to let him play on the steps to get rid of some energy. And I'm standing in here talking to the parents, and out of the corner of my eye, I could see Josh run to his grandfather, and he was crying hysterically. His grandfather had to pick him up, bring him into the tavern, and try to calm him down, which he finally did. And he says, okay, let's get back out and play some more. Well, Josh got hysterical again. He would not come out here. He tried taking him outside on a porch. Wouldn't go for that. He finally, his father decided, I got to take him home. They took him home, and they had to leave through the downstairs. He couldn't bring him out in the hallway. And they went home, and they said he was fine once he got home. He just kept saying, there's no monsters here. So he saw something on the steps. And what it was, we don't know. But to a child, he was like 2, 3 years old, anything's a monster. You know, it could have been, which somebody told me might have been a nurse. Like the ghost of a nurse that There was a sick room upstairs at one time. You know, in those days, the nurses wore different outfits, you know, the little hats, the aprons, the long dresses.
I would be here in the morning by myself early in the morning and would be working away and would think that I heard a baby crying. And it's like those mother's ears where you hear that sound and you instantly snap to attention. And I would get up and walk around and see if it was a piece of equipment that was kicking on or whether it was possibly the wind that was blowing and making that noise. I knew I was the only person in the building. I knew there wasn't a baby here that was crying, but I kept hearing something that sounded to me like a baby. So I must have heard it on at least a dozen occasions before I had the nerve to bring it up to some of the other girls that had been here working for longer. And I said, has anyone ever heard something that sounds like a baby crying? And everybody was like, no, we've never heard a baby. So about 2 weeks after I asked everyone, have you ever heard a baby crying? And everybody said no. I sent one of the girls on her way. She was on her way into work and she was in her uniform and she stopped at a little market that's down the road from here and to get tomatoes or something that we needed, we were running low on. And as she was standing in line, there was a woman, an older woman that was there in front of her checking out, and they struck up a conversation. And this woman said to my employee, like, boy, you're buying a lot of tomatoes. And she said, oh, I'm buying them for the Jean Bonnet Tavern. And she said, oh, I just love that building. And she said, every time I drive by that, I think about when I was a little girl and I overheard my parents talking about a baby that was found there, abandoned there. And she said, when they realized I was little and it was inappropriate, and when they realized that I was listening to them discuss this, they stopped talking about it. And she said, I always wished that before they had died, I had asked them what happened to the baby. She said, I have no idea whether it was alive when it was found or whether it had been there exposed to the elements too long and it didn't make it. But, so it was just really interesting. And she came, when my employee came back to work, she said, Melissa, I know the story of your baby. And from that day forward, I've never heard it cry again.
His mother told him that if he ate his dinner, he could have ice cream. So he ate his meal. She says, okay, you can order the ice cream. And all of a sudden he got hysterical. And they kept asking him what was wrong. And he said he saw eyes in the window because there was monsters here. And to a child, anything is a monster.
The ghost is the original stairway, and there's your fuse box.
Thank you. That makes sense.
However, this is the stairway where the horse thief was hung.
Oh, really?
Right in here.
Yeah, because I was getting it over here in the stairway.
We had the blender here in the bar, and it would come on and run by itself. And so we made a rule, like you have to start unplugging the blender at night because it would be running. And the first time that it happened, bed and breakfast guests came down in the morning and I said, how did you sleep? And they said, well, we slept fine, except for the fact that at about 2:30, the blender started running and it ran for an hour and then shut off. And I even said, I was like, oh, they were imagining things. Like, there's no way that blender came on and ran for an hour and then shut off. The next morning when I was walking up the steps, I was halfway up the steps and the blender came on. Almost as if, again, to say, yes, it really happened. It really came on and ran.
The bathroom. And this Melissa and I were in there and we were putting a new swag over the mirror, and there was a wreath that we put on a sink and put a bowl of potpourri into it. I stayed up here. She went downstairs to get one of the girls to come up to see what we had done. There was one couple in the tavern. Neither one of them had gotten up. They came back up. Melissa opened the door. I was behind her, and all of a sudden Melissa goes, oh my. And I said, what? And she says, look. Well, it was like somebody had picked up old potpourri and tossed it in the air. It was all over the counter, all over the floor.
Immediately when we walk in, stuff starts happening. I was in here earlier, and I went to use the towel dispenser, which is motion activated. And you can see, put your hand near it, nothing happens. Okay, so take a paper towel off, right? I go to get another towel. Okay, it worked that time. It didn't work for me. Then it started dispensing on its own. I'm not. This is great. It's going right now.
Now, we were up here earlier,
Yeah,
and it stayed at a constant 666.
that's not good.
And that was right over here by the steps.
But almost every week I get pictures that somebody sends to me. They have an unexplained light, they have orbs, they have a shadowy figure.
While we were doing an EVP in the attic, Pat makes a joke. And suddenly all these orbs fly in between us. And we caught that.
I'll wait here while Craig goes into the attic after the demonic.
All right, you try some EVPs?
Yeah, let's try EVP in here.
Get this a little closer for you.
I'll wait here while Craig goes into the attic.
Here I go. We knew it was going to be a good night right from the start.
She's our pastry chef. She'll open in the mornings. And she said one morning she came in and started coffee. And she walked to the back of the kitchen to like set the kitchen up for lunch, get everything ready. And she said a box of straws flew across the thing and were on the floor. She said, I turned around and walked to the front of the kitchen where the coffee was. She had forgotten to put a pot underneath it. And she said, I just looked up and said, thank you. Because the coffee would have made a whole lot more mess than those straws would have made.
Yeah.
But she said it was just like amazing. Like she said, I try really hard to like stay focused and think, this isn't really happening. She said, but somebody was there to tell me you didn't put a pot under there.
Well, I've had a lot happen to me, and I don't think I'm exceedingly perceptive or really in tune to, like, I don't ever feel anything. I don't ever feel like anybody's watching me. I'm not real caught up in it, but I absolutely have things that I can't explain away. And one instance is that when you close, the manager is the last person in the building. Mm-hmm. And there's very rare that I do a close and then turn around and open in the morning. But it was a Sunday evening. I was closed. I was the last person that walked down through the dining room. There was myself and another employee, and I stopped on the way down through the dining room and straightened out silverware, which I habitually do, almost compulsively do. So I lined everything up. The fork and the knife and the spoon and the napkin. So it's like just centered exactly on the placemat. And it's always like in a certain way that I like it lined up. And the next morning, so I was the last person through the dining room, and the girl was waiting for me to walk through the dining room because I stopped and fiddled with this. And she said, she was like, oh, Melissa, you just couldn't walk by that, could you? And I said, no, I like it to be a certain way. The next morning when I came in, I unlocked the back door and walked through the dining room, turned on the lights, walked out into the dining room, and the table that I had adjusted, all of the silverware and the napkins were taken off that table in the center of the table. And it almost like to let me know, like it was something that I would remember because I had stopped and made a point of straightening it out, and somebody had even teased me about it. So the next morning when I walked by it, I was like, okay, I get the message that you're trying to give me. So.
I was upstairs in room 3, and I was laying down. We were all three of us, Amy, Karen, and myself, were staying overnight. So I went upstairs about 11 o'clock to lay down, and I read for about half an hour, 45 minutes, and I rolled over, turned off the light, and within 30 seconds to a minute, someone laid down right beside me.
And that was
just
supposed to
as
be me.
gently, and it was as gentle could be. And then I heard whispering and giggling, and very soft footsteps. And then 10 minutes later, it's as gently as it laid down, it got up. And I never looked, but I knew somebody was laying right beside me. I could feel it. It was a very calming, very, very calming.
But she thought it was Amy and I coming into bed.
Mm-hmm.
And we were down in the tavern. She thought it was Amy and I. And she said, I rolled over to say, oh, that was so nice of you to be so quiet. And she said, I looked and you weren't there. So it was really, really like, she came down and said to us, like, guys, it's time. We have to go to sleep now. And we did. We tried to go to sleep, but then we were both also wired. We stayed up and played Uno.
We played Uno the rest of the night.
We're in room 1. We've got high EMF readings. 5-4. 6-2. Right on the floor by the bed. You get a reading right here.
Yep.
Now they've ripped up the floors. There's no wiring.
Well, the different times I've been in here, I get the sense that there was a man that was murdered in either, I'm kind of thinking either here or over in this room. There's a connection somehow between the two.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling that this man was hidden underneath the bed.
Oh.
Probably until they were able to get rid of the body or whatever. But I think it had to do with this area, either here on this side of the bed, or it started over here.
Picks up that there's been a murder in the room. A man's been shot through the window, lands by the bed.
On another visit to the tavern, we came here during the daytime. Now, what happened that day was bizarre. We got footsteps in the room where it says a man was murdered, and the footsteps appeared on a thermal camera. They didn't go away. We did tests to make sure that those footsteps weren't ours, and the footsteps we made went away, but these never did. So there's something about that room.
We get the black light out. Sure enough, blood stains on the floor. Right in here. Right here, look.
Wow, look at
It's like it's concentrated right there,
Right here.
in this
That's where
area.
all the EMFs readings. Hi, were you murdered in this room?
Hi, were you murdered in this room? We're trying to help you. Could you tell us if you were murdered, if you were shot in this room? Is that your blood we see on the floor? Why were you shot? Can you tell us who shot you? Can you tell us what year it is?
Very good answers.
Doesn't want to talk about it.
Would you like us to leave this room now?
Yes, please?
Yes, please. I was just going to say
Yes,
please. There was a please in there.
We got yes, please. You're right, he doesn't want to talk about it.
Okay, we'll leave you alone now. Thank you. Maybe if we come back later, you'll tell us your name? Oh, I just got cold. All right, getting stuff on the baseline sweep.
When we took over early on, maybe in the first year that we were here. There, we have an apartment that is on the fourth floor kind of the building, the fourth level of the building. We like to keep an employee up there that's here with our overnight guests. There was nobody living in the apartment. So every morning as part of my routine, I would go up and walk through the bed and breakfast rooms to make sure everything was okay. And I would go and I would test that door to the apartment before I would go downstairs to start opening up the kitchen. So I finished my paperwork, went upstairs, walked around, tested the door to the apartment, everything locked up, everything good, no lights on, no water running, that sort of thing. Came back down, started opening the kitchen up, and had an interview with a young man that was applying for a position. So he arrived, I unlocked the door to let him in. I was the only person in the building, met with him, really liked him, and took him on a tour of the building. He'd never been here before. And so I brought him up to the tavern level. I took him up to the bed and breakfast rooms to show him, you know, what all the business was about. And when we rounded the corner upstairs, the door to the apartment was hanging wide open. And I had just been up maybe 45 minutes earlier and shook it, you know, and tried to open it and felt that it was locked. And so I, you know, of course I was, and I'm a little on the dramatic side. So I was like, oh my gosh, this was locked. And he thought I was nuts. He had never been in the building. He was like, well, I'll just go up there and look around, you know. So he goes up and I'm hovering kind of at the bottom of the stairs, and he went upstairs and walked around. He said, there's nothing up here. And I said, okay, you know. So I came up and I looked around. Then when I came back downstairs, I called my husband and I said, did you give the key to the apartment to anyone, like a workman or something? And he said, no. And I said, okay. Well, I went back downstairs, and by that time another employee had arrived, and I said, you're not gonna believe what happened. I was like, I checked the door, it was locked. I went back up there and it was unlocked and open. And I said, well, I'm thinking about it. I'm gonna run up there and lock it up. So I came to the office, got the key to the apartment, ran upstairs, and when I got there, the door was shut and locked. You have to lock it with a key. Nobody else was in here that had a key. And I just, at that point, I was like, okay, I'm not going back up there. I'm not hunting around anymore. I'm just gonna let it be. It's locked up. And
We're up in the apartment. Now, the apartment has all kinds of stories about it. Melissa's told us stories. We go up there. That's the first place we hit. We're getting EVPs right off. I guess we could, you want to go lights off?
Yeah, that'll work.
Where's the light for?
There we go.
Is there anybody up here with us tonight? My name's Greg, and Pat, can you tell us your name? Why are you still here? That's what year it is. She used to live here. Did you work here? Did you die here? You let us leave?
We're getting background radiation counts, and so we know something's going on in there.
I am 128, right where I was just at.
Yep. It's between us now, coming toward me.
.8 right here.
Yep. Oh yeah. Big focus, won't focus at all. Nice. What we do is leave a camera and an EVP recorder rolling, and we walk out. The EVP we got was pretty interesting, because basically the ghosts were calling us out saying, take a shot at us. I've never heard that before.
there was a big event going on in Johnstown. They called and they were desperate, and they had to be here this weekend, and they really needed a room. And we said, well, we do have an apartment that's on the top level, and we typically don't rent it out to overnight guests, but if you're interested. So when they came and they checked in, they'd never been to this area, didn't know anything about us or our history. They came and they were up there in the apartment, and the parents came down. I think they had all come down for dinner, and then the girls had gone back upstairs. They were down here maybe for about 40 minutes or half an hour, and the girls came down, and they were all worked up and upset, and they felt that there's something up there, there's something that's up there, and they refused to stay. They ended up having to pack up and drive back home and then come back the next day for their event. It has functioned as a tavern and a public house, and it also acted as a sort of like a courthouse where they would hear some trials and a traveling magistrate would come in and hear trials, which probably gives us one of our most famous stories about the horse thief that was hung here in the building, was captured and brought here and found guilty and hung here in the building.
The horse thief that was hung on the steps, what I did was I left a camera at the foot of those steps. Now, during a lockdown in which no one's near this camera, you can hear someone actually try to maneuver the zoom button on the camera. If the zoom is already zoomed out and you try to press it, you hear a click. We have that on the stairway, so something was messing with my camera. Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
The gentleman that was hung, the horse thief, because this was a courthouse at one time, seeking refuge from the Indians because they were accusing him of being a horse thief. And the way I've heard it is that somebody recognized him and said he is a horse thief. They held court right there on the spot, found him guilty, and hung him. And supposedly then hung his body outside so the Indians would see that they took care of justice for them.